It is Tuesday, June 4th, 2019, and this is the Pro and the Con Show. And I'm your host, Michael James Ott. Welcome to the show once again. The intent of the show, again, just very briefly, is to try to strip the bias out of the information that flows to us. Have a discussion about how to do that. Do some examples here in the news, and we look at some left-leaning sources, some right-leaning sources, and some that are, for the most part, mostly unbiased. But in any case, it's to detect, in some cases, the news or some events occur and they're not even reported on some of the streams of information that you might receive. Or if they are reported, they can be definitely, biased, presented in a way that's intended to incite some kind of emotion or other thing that isn't truthful. And again, the news itself is rather brief, right? It's the who, what, where, and when, and all the other stuff is just opinion, basically, some kind of forecast, analysis. Anytime you see those words, analysis, forecast, opinion, anytime someone says, well, what do you think? That's not the news. That's, if they say, well, what did you see? What did you hear? And the answer to those questions is the news, okay? The unbiased news. And then the hope is that if we get the bias out, if we take the time to understand these issues and the truth behind them, the real information, then we'll come closer together to run this country in a better way. I mean, we're all neighbors, 340 million of us in this country, roughly. And hey, the laws apply to all of us. So let's work together to make the laws that we think will work for all of us. So in today's news, Mr. Trump is in the UK, and he's been there for a couple of days now, and there's some protests going on. So this is not massive protests. This is apparently a couple thousand people, plus minus. And, they have some detrimental shapes, models, cartoons, signage, but they're, as far as we can tell, as far as the different sources that I've seen, both conservative and liberal, if they show anything at all, it's these protesters are negative for Mr. Trump. And he, of course, being Mr. Trump, is totally denying that even exists. In fact, he's claiming that these people are coming out in droves to support him, and he hears that there might have been a small handful of protesters somewhere, but he never saw them. So, for what it's worth. Now we turn our attention to, again, Mr. Trump and his suggestion and intent. He says that his administration is actually going to start enforcing some tariffs on materials coming in the country from Mexico. So if you live in this country, you know that there's a lot of the manufacturing that was here in this country. A lot of it just moved across the border into Mexico. One of the companies I worked at for many years, actually two of the companies I worked at for many years, they had facilities right across the border in Mexico to take advantage of the low labor rates in Mexico relative to here in the United States. And it's common practice, and there's a bunch of, for example, automobile companies. They have factories down there. So the big ones, Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, and on and on. I think Volkswagen has places down there. I mean, pretty much this is a very consistent, large industry, global industry thing to have facilities in Mexico, mostly right on the border with the United States. And then have, be bringing these things across the border. Anyway, The intent of Mr. Trump is to try to stop some of the immigration issues. So he's trying to enlist or force the Mexican government to get more involved in stopping people from approaching our southern border. And the intent is to push the tariffs. But what's interesting is that, for example, even Mitch McConnell, who has, in my mind, surprisingly been very supportive of Mr. Trump up to this point, he is pushing back on this and saying, we're not going to allow this. And in fact, the Republicans in Congress are trying to organize themselves to see if they can't vote on some legislation with a supermajority such that Mr. Trump cannot veto it, and thereby try to stop this tariff. That discussion is going on. So just wanted you to know about that. So CNN reports, for example, Republicans are flirting with rebellion. That's what they call it. They're flirting with rebellion if Trump moves ahead on Mexico tariffs. On the NPR website, it just says White House's about face on Mexican trade, a gut punch to U.S. businesses. So it says U.S. industries from grocers to clothing makers are saying that Mr. Trump's threatened tariffs on goods from Mexico raise uncertainty. Okay, they raise uncertainty. It's not a crisis necessarily, but the outcome or the impact on our economy and the people on both sides of the border is uncertain. And they also question why we would do this when it seemed like a new trade agreement was seemingly near. So we had the NAFTA trade agreement, and Mr. Trump, of course, decided he wanted to throw that away. And it's my understanding that they have renegotiated, and now something similar to NAFTA, but it seems like marginally different, was about to be approved. But now we have this problem. And then just checking on what is on Fox here. So even Fox, which is normally Trump supporting and leaves some amount of the stories that are detrimental to him out, they have on their main page, Trump baby blimp flies in London as protests greet the president. So normally if there's positive groups there, Fox can be counted on to try to show them as opposed to people that are negative. And so it's a little bit interesting that they even would acknowledge that there's protests, because that's a fairly common thing for them to not acknowledge that on their website. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch upon was at Breitbart. Okay, so this is, we have this discussion periodically about how the bias comes into these stories, and it's the choice of words. It's, are they choosing words that are intended to incite some kind of emotion or anger? And then also it's the choice of pictures. So in Breitbart, on one of their lead headlines on their website, the headline for this is Pelosi, okay? Public not smart enough to understand impeachment. So let me just show you what this thing looks like. I'll flip this over, and I'll hold that so you can read that for yourselves for just a moment. Okay? So now, there's the headline. You see the picture, okay? This is not a very positive picture of Ms. Pelosi. And then the headline says, public not smart enough to understand impeachment. So basically, the inference is, what they're trying to make you believe is that Ms. Pelosi thinks that people are stupid. Well, she doesn't think people are stupid, at least in the article. It would not seem so. And she, in fact, didn't say that. But the attempt here is to imply that Ms. Pelosi thinks people are stupid. So let's go and actually read the words that she said. So, and by the way, right below the caption of this picture is, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, recently expressed concerns that the American public is not smart enough to truly understand the impeachment process. Well, that's not what she's saying in here. Let me go down to what she actually said. So she says, she has said in the past that she believes that Mr. Trump is involved in a cover-up. Okay, that's a truthful statement. She did that. And then here's a quotation. "We do believe that it's important to follow the facts." Okay. "We believe that no one is above the law, including the President of the United States, and we believe the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up." So that's what she said before. Okay. Now, the particular quotation that Breitbart is citing to say that Ms. Pelosi thinks everyone is stupid, here's what it says. "The Speaker, according to two sources with knowledge of a meeting," it was a meeting amongst Democrats, "expressed concerns." Okay, so the Speaker expressed concerns that the public still doesn't understand how the process of impeachment would play out. Well, nobody does. This is the thing, is that you don't know. It's like a trial. Okay, so what kind of additional information would be gathered? What kind of testimony would be part of it? And then ultimately, what would people think of the evidence and the testimony that was provided? And would there be a growing push to try to remove Mr. Trump from office, or would it have the opposite effect and basically say, no, these kinds of things are not serious enough to remove him from office? So who knows how impeachment would play out? I certainly don't. Again, I'm not going to try to predict, right? That would be opinion. That would be prognostication. All right. And then just to continue, she noted that in her time over the recent recess that she was back in California, well-educated voters didn't seem to understand that impeachment proceedings would not necessarily result in Trump's immediate ouster from office. So this is a common thing. We're not all quite sure exactly what's going to happen. Most of us are a little bit ignorant. Okay, that's not a bad word. We're all ignorant. We're all ignorant of stuff. None of us are all-knowing, although Mr. Trump sometimes claims that he is. The rest of us are not, and I certainly am not, and you certainly are not. And so one of the things that some of us are a little bit sketchy on is because it's been a long time. The last time there was discussion about impeachment was Mr. Clinton, and then before him was Mr. Nixon. So it's been a long time, and it's a fairly infrequent process, so there's a lot of people that would not be up to speed on what would happen. So even people that are trying to follow events somewhat closely, as I'm encouraging you to do, might still need some primer, if you will, some tutoring. Anyway, so none of that is Ms. Pelosi saying that anyone is stupid or too dumb to understand it, not smart enough. So this is Breitbart. Depending on the columnist, they can be pretty aggressive with their bias that they in the way that they present the information. All right. So anyway, I hope the conversation has helped you kind of think about things, maybe think about things in a little bit different way. Again, I can't encourage you enough to focus on the who, the what, the where, the when. And that's the real factual news. The rest of it, opinion and stuff like that, try to leave that aside. And then based on the facts, the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against, form your own opinions. Think about, how you think things should be done in the future, and, really focus on working together as opposed to standing on opposite sides of the street and hurling insults at each other. we're all together in this, and in the end, the laws apply to all of us. So, hey, let's get together and you tell me why you think the way that you think, and please ask me why I think the way that I think. And then let's talk about why there's differences and try to gather information and get together so we can have a common place to mostly move forward together. I hope that makes sense to one and all. And it's time for the end of the show. So for Tuesday, June 4th, 2019, again, Michael James Ott. You can find my these videos if you're not watching them on FaceTime. Facebook Live. You can see them on YouTube at Ott in 2020. Bye for now.